Several of the fun things I've done in my life was I worked for the National Park Service in Washington, D.C. at their storage facility there. And while I was there, I was able to store many of Frederick Douglass's garments. It's 30 years ago now. No, it's more than 30 years ago. I've been here almost 30 years. And I've been kicking myself because I wish I knew that I was going to need to know this in 30 years. And I did try to contact my colleagues back there, but there's been some upheaval in the facility there, so they weren't able to help me much. Even just to have gotten a catalog of which things I had stored away, in case it would help any of you. But many of his shirts and many of his nightshirts and those sorts of things were what I was working with there.
Meet me at the Chazen. I'm your host, Gianofer Fields. We've been talking a lot about Thomas Ball's Emancipation Group sculpture as the catalyst for the Remancipation Project. However, it is no longer the sculpture at the center of our discussions. On May 4th, artist Sanford Bigger's response entitled Lifting the Veil made its debut in the Rolling Gallery at the Chazen Museum of Art. The sculpture features a standing Frederick Douglass holding the scales of justice in his left hand. In his right, Douglass holds a quilt over a seated, barefoot Lincoln as he gazes downward reading the Emancipation Proclamation. Designed by Biggers, the marble sculpture was carved by a team of sculptors led by Martin Foote at the Quarra Stone Company in Madison, Wisconsin. Frederick Douglass was the most photographed man during his time, and while his hair was his most distinguished feature, his garments also told the story. But how do you turn fabric into stone? The first step is understanding the clothing worn in the 1860s, and to do that, you've got to get close and take a good look. That required a field trip to the Wisconsin State Historical Society. Curator Tamara Funk made the dreams of the Quarra Stone sculptors, fabricators, and fellow textile junkies come true.
I'll give you some quick background on how I chose the objects, because we have a few things from the 1860s. So I got on interlibrary loan this work on photographs of Frederick Douglass, and Sarah bought one for you folks as well. You have it, okay. One of the things that I noticed as I studied these was that Frederick Douglass, right in the 60s, is wearing a very different kind of vest than he wears earlier, although he keeps wearing it some into his later years, but it's somewhat atypical. So I've brought down a vest that was sort of typical 1860s, but I've also brought down the closest thing in cut. It's not exact, but the closest thing in cut to the vest that Douglass is wearing in the 1860s that we had in our collection. And interestingly enough, that piece was sort of a paramilitary piece. So I have a whole new area of research I think I want to go into now, which was why was Douglass wearing this at that time? He has to be saying something. And I mean, that's how we clothing historians look at clothing. It's not just, oh, I got up and threw things on, generally. When that initial purchase is made, there is thought going into it. So, throwing it out there for anyone who needs a master's thesis, why is Frederick Douglass wearing these slightly alternate vests during that period of the 1860s? Okay, cool thought to leave you with. Now we'll get down to the clothing. Did I hear that we were first for the coat?
I think we should.
Okay. This coat is dated broadly 1860 to 1869, which what that means in terms of the museum setting is that whoever brought it in was probably a later family member and didn't know the exact storyline on it, but that we've dated it based on its parts, how it looks, its style, that sort of thing. I was particularly pleased with this choice because there's an 1850 or so picture of Douglass wearing a velvet-collared frock coat like this. So,
Could we take photographs?
yes, if you can turn off your flash. And also, those of you who are going to need to be actually working, come on up and stand around the table. We can, well, I can't let you touch. I can have you as close as humanly possible. And I'm just going to let you sort of look at the front plane, and then when you feel like you've looked at that enough, I'm going to open it up, and then we're going to do the same on the back. One of the things, a little textily note, but it might actually have an impact on you, that I want to point out to you, and I talked to one of you about this when I was out at your place, is take a look at, in the modern day, the lining would be joined with the edge, and it would be turned over there. Mm-hmm. In this time period, this cloth is so tightly woven and then fold that it holds on its own. So it's the raw edge that actually hangs out at the very bottom. And yet it does not look in any way raw the way modern cloth would.
Is this a jacket that would have been, rather than purchasing a new one, it would have been reworked if they wanted to be more modern or to change sort of like the style of the jacket? Is it one of those that's made with that sort of in mind?
For Lincoln and Douglas, I'm going to say probably not, because they're prominent men, and Douglas particularly is very aware of fashion. His photos are fashion forward, if you will. So
then that's even more proof that choosing that vest would have been a definite choice as opposed to what was available.
I feel like it is, yeah. Yes. You know, in a modern man's jacket, the sleeve is straight cut. In this time period and before, there's a curve to the cut so that it will fit more nicely.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
twist with the arm. Is that
It just, you stand at a more
normal position.
Yeah, right. Are we ready for me to open the front flaps to take a look inside? Okay. You may want to, before I do that, take a look at the buttonholes.
And it's handmade.
It's handmade,
Yeah,
right.
I noticed.
And it would have been, let me just take a quick look. The stitch they would have used would have been to go around the open hole and then wrap the thread around the needle and push it on through so that there's a little knot. And that gives a little more strength. With the knot end to the open area, that gives a little more strength.
Oh, interesting.
So if you want the personal reminiscences, one of the fun things I got to do while I was at that facility was that the suit that Lincoln died in needed to be packaged up and sent off for conservation. And so I was the person who got to do that whole transport process. And one of the most amazing things of my life, the suit was exhibited, closed for about 25 years prior to that. And when I went in and took it off of its form, I discovered that in these skirt panels, there was quilting, black on black. And it was fairly common to put quilting into clothing in that time period when they didn't have central heat, because you're cold a lot of the time. Yeah. And so quilted into this tail was ribbons around the outside edge and an eagle in the center. And in a ribbon off of the eagle's talon was another ribbon, and in that was quilted "One Country, One Destiny." Oh, wow. I mean, doesn't that just make, it makes me shiver at this remove in time. It was obviously made for him. And that was his outer coat. His inner coat was a Brooks Brothers, in fact.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Brooks Brothers had been founded in the 1850s. Yeah. And so, yeah. And you folks just let me know when you're ready to move on to the next.
Yeah, I think we've got enough info there.
Yep.
too.
Okay. All right. Well, now everything's downhill from there.
Oh, no, that shirt looks pretty yummy.
I'm going to go with the pants. One of the things that starts happening in the 1860s is that the pants get much slouchier. Let's see, describe that. More droopy. So they were running in the 40s and 50s much more fitted, and they start getting a little bit bigger in the leg and a little more droopy as you move through the 60s. So you're seeing a whole bunch of buttons here. You need some explanation on that. What we have happening is that this comes down, this opens up, this opens up. You get yourself in. By the way, this is flannel lined because, again, in a time period when you're not, Wisconsin, but when in a time period when you're not centrally heated, you're cold all the time. So you slide your legs in, then you button up the 2 buttons here, and then you button to the row of buttons on the bottom. I'm going to just do 2 as an example. You'll also notice that these buttons are not the fancy, elegant buttons of the coat. These are just little stamped metal buttons. And then all of these buttons up here, suspenders, exactly. You button your suspenders to those.
I think I would like some pants like I was just going to turn to her and say we should make a pair.
Well,
You
there are
can get
yeah,
them.
there are patterns like that. And actually I've seen them in catalogs where they're called like sailor's pants.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can order from your local Amish supply place,
Oh, right.
which there are lots of them that do mail order. Because I've had to buy lots of these pants because as among the things I've done in my career, I costumed historic sites.
Right.
So I had to have clothing for my men interpreters.
Did you work at Colonial Williamsburg?
I didn't, but I went to college there.
That's my next stop.
I was the curator at Pendarvis for 21 years. Yeah, so that's when I had my costumed interpreters. I also wrote my master's thesis on reproduction costuming. So, strange thing, but there it
We're
is.
going to become good friends.
I would like that.
Yeah, me too.
And then I'll just do one quick button here so that you have a sense of how you're closing the fall there.
Could you also use these as a way to take in the waist? Like if if you've shape shifted?
Okay, so I've never seen one where that was clearly something that happened.
But why would I tell you if I'm shape shifting? I'd be just like, out.
Yeah, I don't know. Oftentimes, you might see also a little watch pocket, either in pants or in the vest. Yeah, but down low in this time
Lower,
period.
okay.
Yeah. All right, let's turn these over. The back has really just, I think, one big surprise for you. Maybe 2.
There's your shapeshifter.
There's your shapeshifter.
Okay.
So your suspenders buttoning on, your adjustment of shape, and these are just much more roomy in the rump than I think you would have expected.
That would be great for me. Right? I was like, now you're talking my language.
I will say, though, that shape, as roomy as it is positively small compared to the earlier part of the century and the 18th century, when it's just a balloon back there. It actually is
Pantaloons.
gathered in. Yeah. For the statue, this is actually isn't going to come into play because it'll be under his coat. Yeah.
But
But
we'll
it's
know
good
it's
to
there.
know.
Okay.
And to
It gives you a
understand.
sense of what all is happening around there. Yeah.
So how close to these pants are the Amish-made pants?
Very close. Yeah, very close. It was
Look at how this scallops too. Like there's this nice little scallop right there.
a little bit, yeah, it sure does. Yep.
So pretty. I'm probably going to use the wrong term, but it's like a very feminine like quality to the pants. It's like very scalloped and soft and cut on buttons. It's very, when we compare them to standard clothes now where everything men seems to be straight cut and, very hard edge. It's like very soft and considerate of the person wearing them as opposed to the fashion itself.
Yeah, I'm going to actually agree with you in part because we're only, in 1860, we're only just moving into the time period where men have very little decorative elements in their clothing. In another setting, I once said to the people present, men's clothing, boring us to death since 1850. Because prior to that, it was elegant silks and colors and pattern and shape. And this clothing represents the time when we're just moving into that time where men become dark colored, wearing basic standard, everyone's alike, but they haven't yet gone all the way there because their vests are still retaining some of that older way. And I'm going to bring out not the military vest first, but the other vest for you to see right now. See how you gave me a segue?
I love giving segues. It's my middle name.
It's got pattern and weave and decoration, and look at the buttons.
Is that wood inside the button?
I believe it's
Or is that stitch?
embroidered.
Stitched?
Yeah,
I'm not looking through the right part of my bifocal.
that's exactly it. So I thought it would be maybe useful for you to see both kinds of vests, both the ones that are that you see more in style during the 1860s, as well as this other one that was my best approximation of what we see Douglas wearing in the 1860s a lot. So this one has more of a shawl collar. There'd be an opening where the shirt shows out, and it's more decorative. And then let's take a quick look at the back, which is nowhere near as elegant, because you're going on the assumption that you are in your frock coat, in your suit coat, and not getting out of it, at least during formal situations. But the collar, you see, is the elegant cloth because it sticks up over the frock coat a little bit. So you want it to look nice. And then again, this has come loose over time. You do your adjusting of shape by that set of buckles there. I'll open it to the inside so we can all see that.
How many pockets? 1, 2, 3 pockets.
Yes. You know what? We may do this a different way. I don't like the amount of strain that is going to be caused if I unbutton it. So here we have another interesting thing where they have a little layer of leather in there at the bottom.
For like insulation, like before.
Yeah.
I think that's going to give a little stability so that it doesn't kind of crunch up at the bottom. It sits nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give it some weight,
Yes.
make it light.
And you'll see on this is not tight woven wool. This is a brocaded silk, so it is turned over and finished in. All right. From here, let's move into the other vest. As you look at the vests on Douglas. This is not a perfect match.
That's the military one, huh?
That's the military one. And when you look at the pictures in the book, he's wearing these really high-necked vests. And it's right over there if you want to take a look. In many of his 1860s pictures. So I dug out the closest thing I could think of.
Is that a wool?
It is, yep. It's not as fine a wool. So this one is turned over and caught into the back end.
Look at the stuffing.
There you go. I was talking about wadding and padding.
Is it
There
wool?
it is. It looks like it.
I believe it is, yep.
So I wonder if the high collar also has to do with just warmth.
It could,
Generally, yeah.
it could, or I don't know. I mean, why do we design our military uniforms like we do? It's getting more towards utility, but it hasn't been for a long time. And when you think about, the big sparkling red coats on the 18th century battlefields, why do we do this?
Just like, yeah,
Target.
right? Like, you're really not scaring us with that red. Can I have this?
This is actually a fun shirt in and of itself because Cyrus McCormick wore it. McCormick Reaper. So,
I would wear this as a dress.
yeah,
It's a nightshirt to me.
it's very similar to a nightshirt. There's the little comment for what I want to say about this is it's way bigger than you expect for a shirt, coming from the modern times. But really, the shirt in the 18th century is the nightshirt. They are one and the same. You get up in the day and put your stuff over it, and you go to bed at night, wear it, and you get up in the day and put your stuff over it.
Just like I do now.
In the 19th century, they've moved to having more cottons and therefore more washings, more ability to do washings. So, but they're still keeping to that sort of old concept of the shirt being a big cover garment. So it's great big. And now the little bit of space in the rear of the pants makes sense because you have to stick this all somewhere.
Yeah.
So,
What's this little mark here?
Taylor's mark or something?
well, the laundry mark is over here. So I'm gonna say that's a stain. It's a
Oh my God, it is. It's a perfect X.
Oh,
Or could that be rust from something like?
It could, yeah. That's called a laundry mark. You see, it's his number 9 shirt and the date when he started wearing it and whose it is. Because he's Cyrus McCormick, so he can send his laundry out to a laundry woman. So you keep track of them that way.
Which meant the laundry woman could read.
And white.
Well, not necessarily.
Somebody at the laundry could.
Because you did it more for tracking, that you got back everything you brought out. So you could read, but not necessarily that the laundry woman could.
Yeah, but someone has to write it.
Yeah.
But theoretically,
The tailor maybe would have, who knows? Who would have written that?
probably a servant in Cyrus McCormick's house
Okay.
would have labeled that. And he was wealthy enough, he could have had a laundry woman
In-house.
in-house.
Because he wasn't the only person in that house.
Right.
But most likely not the only male.
Right.
With that much money, he's going to have an heir.
Yeah.
Or 17, or who knows.
And I hate to mention it, but also, even within the household, you sometimes distrusted your servants, and so you would tag your stuff so you knew that nothing's disappearing. The past isn't always lovely. Let me show you the back, because the yoke on this is quite interesting, too.
It reminds me of the artist's smock in the back.
Exactly. Because smocks and all of those sorts of garments also come out of that same tradition. There's agricultural smocks in the 18th century that is just a big, coarser shirt that you put on over everything so that your clothing is protected when you're doing heavy labor.
I am bringing that back.
Isn't it that, yeah.
Let's make one.
And smocking, the concept of smocking, which is where you gather very close pleats and embroider on them, which is now a very decorative thing, they come from agricultural smocks. And yeah, if you look back, you'll see smocks that have smocking, and it's great fun. All right, just 2 more to go. These are pertinent to the carvers, though. So.
Details.
So, the thing at the neck, what we would call a necktie, but would have been called either a cravat or a stock in the time period. I tend to think of stocks as a little bit earlier, prior to when they're putting the bow tie on it, and cravats is a little later. But then this one's a preformed one. I could have brought down a cravat that was just the stretch of silk, but that wouldn't have helped you much.
So it's like a snap-on tie?
It is.
So now you don't have to feel bad when you have to wear one.
See? What?
What is the material in there?
Yeah, what's the stiffening?
There's no plastic, right?
There's no
Plastic
plastic.
yet.
It's metal.
It's like those 90s bracelets.
No wonder they fainted so much. They had like constriction on it.
Right. So that gave a good shape and very similar to what I thought I'd seen in the pictures. So that's the one I chose.
Oh, nice.
It's much narrower than I would have expected.
The wideness of the bow goes up and down over the 19th century.
Okay.
I think it's a little more restrained in the 1860s than it was, say, in the 40s. And for that one, I'd go with the images you see in the book, because it's pretty simple, and just whatever he's going with in the 60s, I think, is probably best. And you still have that whole decision you have to make about whether it gets swallowed up by the high-neck vest or whether it's going to be visible in the open neck. I have to admit, I spent way more research time on that question for you than you really needed me to. But I got so fascinated. I mean, this is my thing. I do reproduction costuming, and and essentially, you guys are doing reproduction costuming.
Kirsten, shoes.
Look at these.
I found a pair of shoes. I had told Sarah I had not found a pair of shoes, but I did.
It doesn't even look there's an obvious left or right, or am I just blind?
That is correct. It actually is during the Civil War that military shoes started being made on shaped lasts. And so it's after the Civil War that becomes popular and goes to the broad population.
So before then, there was no real left or right shoe.
No. In fact, you could switch them back and forth to even out the wear.
No, thank you. Nah, this can't be comfortable.
So yeah, for a civilian during the war, they're still wearing what's called straight last shoes, because the last is the form they make them on, and they're straight.
So there's not a left and a right.
Yeah.
You just do. You just decide with the buckle where you want the buckle away. Yeah, yeah.
Kind
She
of.
said you would back and forth them to make sure the wear was even. So even then,
Yeah.
you're still just swapping them back and forth.
But if your buckle is straight up at the top, you can just switch them back and forth and it doesn't matter. You know, we think of buckles having to be to the correct side. Well, the top is a perfectly good side if you're going to switch your shoes back and forth.
Would there have been some lining in the shoe to prevent that from just chewing up the back of your foot?
Let's see what they have in this shoe. But there is a little bit of a lining here. kind of a chamois, like a suede leather. I would say compared to our view of the world, they probably aren't the most comfortable shoes. The donor of these knew very little about their history, so we are left with not a lot of story about the specific person who wore these. Yes, certainly.
It was all about walking, wasn't it?
How bizarre to have an arch, but not a left and a right. That would have been, well, how would you have known the difference? You wouldn't have known.
Right, you never felt anything else.
Yeah, you wouldn't have known.
The right and left shoe did catch on pretty quickly after the war, so maybe we wanted, yeah, maybe that was something that was good for our feet, we all thought.
When did the shoe become part of the fashion trend, though, for women? Was it, I've read because of tuberculosis, and they thought that they were dragging in the disease on the bottom of their skirts. So when they raised the skirt up, that's when shoes became popular, or style of shoe. Is that true?
I would disagree with that, because I know of some unbelievable, beautiful shoes in, say, 1850, made out of the same cloth as the dress, and fancy pattens, they're called, that you put your foot into, and it's on a metal ring to keep you up out of the crud in the street when you're wearing your pretty shoes, and you walk along on these pattens instead. And two, in the 18th century, before men's clothing gets boring, there's fantastic high-heeled men's shoes with red heels and all kinds of cool stuff, but we sobered down by the middle of the 19th century for men.
Too bad.
I know.
Your loss.
So you say it was more fun before what time?
Before about 1850 is when we really start sobering down men's clothing. Yeah. Kind of, at least Europe-wide, Europe and North America. Yeah. All righty. I've thrown a lot at you. Any last questions?
This has been great.
Has it
Yes, it's very informative.
served the
Thank you.
purpose you needed it to?
Yes, it did.
Perfect.
Great.
Good.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you so much.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I will live off of the high of today for several days.
I can come back anytime I go.
Let's come back together and go, woo! You've been listening to Meet Me at the Chazen. Our guest, Tamara Funk, is the curator at the Wisconsin Historical Society. Meet Me at the Chazen is a production of the Chazen Museum of Art on the campus of UW-Madison in Madison, Wisconsin. For more information about the museum, its collections and exhibitions, visit chazen.wisc.edu. I'm your host, Gianofer Fields. Thank you for listening.